The 60s and early 70s was a radical time for America. It would be the first time mankind has left Earth to venture to explore space and new realms that lie beyond our atmosphere. Music was rendered traditional smooth jazz to new funky edges forms of musical expression. Style was no longer looking sharp, but rugged, militant, vibrant, colorful styles that brought new contrast to America's conservative attitudes. Technology seemed to reach new levels of imagination that were once unattainable but now possible. However, besides cultural and technology improvements, the 60s also evoked new emotions and expressions that weren't experienced before. It was a time of renting old traditions and creating new ones, thus allowing voices that weren't expressed before to have a chance to shout. Across America, change was in the air, and it was undeniable. Every corner of America was experiencing something new, a new form of attitude to traditional conservative views. These revolutionary demeanors spread across America, reaching every member of society. One major populace that was expressing and voicing its new form of radicalism was the black community. Influential members such as Jesse Jackson, Dr. King, Ella Baker, Daisy Bate, Fannie Lou Hamer, and other civil rights leaders began to speak and promote change in the Jim Crow South to free the long oppressed black community. These leaders took a peaceful approach, such as organizing marches and speeches to pressure the white American government to reverse its racist policies against the black community. While some of the community in the South was taking a peaceful approach to bring change to fascist America, some members of the black community began to take a radical new approach of confronting those powers by entailing the atrocities it was committing and rebuking the peaceful ways of the other black organizations. This happened to be the instance in Oakland, California, where the constant racism and police brutality drove the community to react, thus forming the Vanguard Liberation Party or the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers sought to protect the black community by having police watch parties. This was accomplished by arming members of the party with weapons and monitoring and ensuring that during a lawful arrest that the police were following the correct protocol. The party was also spearheaded by Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, and eventually Eldridge Cleaver. Besides having police watch parties, the party also enacted the free breakfast program to feed the disadvantaged black youth in the communities, a sickle cell research project to find cures to the rapid epidemic sickle cell occurring in the black community. The Panthers also established Liberty Schools, where black history was taught within the black community to ensure that the community had self-knowledge of their past. The party preached the beauty of black women and black men, which was once exploited and ugly to the lack of their white features. The Vanguard Party was slowly beginning to unify the oppressed people besides the black community, such as the gay and Latino community. The Vanguard Party was successful in aiding the black community and lifting the heavy burdens that were placed upon the black community. However, 2,080 miles away in Tennessee, there was a similar radical wave occurring in the community that was coming from Oakland area. The once heavily segregated area was beginning to experience a new wave of radicalism. The ongoing struggles of the black community in Nashville and Memphis, Tennessee will no longer be silent to the public or the civil rights and black liberation struggle. Memphis was a boiling pot, ready to boil over, with radical, violent, and enlightening consequences. The black community was subjected to racist laws such as Jim Crow regulations, poor housing conditions, low economic wages from jobs, inadequate education, and being sent to Vietnam to die for a country who mistreated them, along with the daily frustrations having to deal with the constant openly racist police brutality. The black community was tired of doing peaceful marches and abiding by the turn-my-cheek philosophy, we shall overcome, preached by Dr. King and the COME organization, also known as the Committee on the Move for Equality, and the NAACP organization. The black community needed another solution, something distinct, unique, upfront, personal, radical, and something different from the passive NAACP and civil rights leaders. From the despairs and radical problems born an organization radical, intelligent, and what the black community needed to express its voice loudly to the white society. Thus, the BOP, the Black Organization Party, was formed as an outlet for the black community. The organization was comprised of black youth, mostly from local universities and high schools in Memphis. The party was founded by Kobe Smith and Charles Cabbage, two black power activists from the city. who pursued a group focused on the outspoken black youth in Memphis. The black youth in Memphis during that time were viewed as misguided, lacking self-knowledge, and created gangs as impotent response to the daily frustrations of being black. The older organizations such as the local NAACP chapter and the COME organization viewed the youth as disgruntled, ignorant, and troublesome. Cabbage and Smith saw them differently. They created recreational sports programs and began to educate the youth. They encouraged them to read books on black power leaders such as the autobiography of Malcolm X, CLR by James Black Coben, and other various conscious literary works. The goal of the organization was to raise the black youth to be self-conscious, a black self-identity, black independence, and to overall be less reliant on the white race and to reject white influence. The organization bore a similar influence to the Black Panthers, adopted many ideals such as developing its own 10-point plan, inspired by Huey Newton, what it was called What We Want. In the plan, the organization outlined the black community's control over education, finance, politics, land ownership, and calling for a Black United Front. The organization will have control over all aspects with the black community in the removal of white businesses in the community, or instilling what is called a ghetto tax, which is basically a tax on white businesses in the black community who are profit and operate the black community. It's also called the black community to have control over the war on poverty, not the white government. The BOP was also the vital factor in pushing black students attending Memphis State University, also known as the University of Memphis now, to create an organization to represent them, which would later be known as the BSA, or Black Student Association. Since the BOP had already established itself as a voice for the people, it needed muscle, or a branch of the organization that was willing to do the groundwork to spread the ideas and philosophy. Their resolution came to form as a coincidental action. In 1967, during a trip to a gas station, Smith and Cabbage were intervened during a racist scam run by the white owner against an Air Force veteran named John Burroughs Smith. Smith, who had never had any radicalism in him, would develop some after being thrown in jail for standing up for being scammed. John Smith would remain in contact with Smith and Cabbage, becoming inspired by the brotherhood and betterment for the community. Cabbage already had a small group of black youth who were a muscle that was comprised of gang members, hoodlums, and local high school dropouts who he educated on the principles of black nationalism. After hearing John Smith's military background, he arranged for him to be the leader of the group. The group would assume the name Invaders after the TV show Invaders. After John Smith became the leader, his personality, experience, and his style attracted youth to the organization from all walks of life in the low-income black community. He instilled discipline, attentiveness, organization, and expansion of knowledge. The Invaders would don a military jacket with the letter Invaders on the back of the jacket, a tiki around their neck, afros, and always sport a beret. The Invaders had an open enrollment policy, open to all black youths in the community of Memphis who wanted to better themselves. There weren't any screening methods or tests. They went about the neighborhoods passing out flyers on guerrilla warfare, pamphlets on the BOP and its principles. The number of members would swell up to 1,500 of the black youth, ages ranging from 13 to 23-year-old black males. The Invaders drew influence and mimicked the West Coast Black Panther nationalist group. The COME, NAACP, and other organizations and citizens viewed the Invader group as a troublesome and angry organization. However, in 1968, the organization would have its chance to shine. On February 3, 1968, two cold black sanitation workers curled inside the trash compartment of the truck to stay warm and avoid the rainy and cold conditions that day. Due to faulty equipment, the trash compactor came back on them and crushed them, killing them. The black sanitation workers experienced things like this and racist company policies due to the fact of them being treated as second-class citizens. Because of these vile conditions that the black sanitation workers were experiencing and the death of the two workers, the black employees for all sanitation companies went on a citywide strike. Cabbage seized the opportunity and began to work with the local NAACP and COME organizations. Though the two organizations had their problems with the BOP and the invaders, they put away their differences to aid in seeking better working and equal pay for the workers. The groups, along with the sanitation workers, organized strikes and marches to protest the death of sanitation workers and horrendous working conditions. The older generations, such as the NAACP and the CUMP organizations, began to develop a fondness with the two youthful radical organizations, admiring their energy, consciousness, and desire to improve the community. However, things would abruptly go sideways for the organization when in March 1968, the Beale Street riots occurred. This was due to the overspilled tensions of the racist policies in Memphis, the protests of the sanitation workers and other businesses, and the treatment of the protesters by the police and citizens that were brutalizing the protesters. During the riots, a 16-year-old black male, Larry Payne, was killed by a Memphis police officer. This action created more tension among the city of Memphis and the black community. The invaders were the part of the blame for the source of the rioting due to their radical stance on burning down the establishment and other militant views. This made it hard for organizations to coincide, along with the indifference in views of nonviolence, protests, and other ideas. Cabbage viewed the nonviolent organization as detrimental to the progress made by the BOP invaders and the invaders in their community. However, the radical organizations respected King. After his March 8, 1968 speech on his promise to come back to Memphis to aid in the sanitation strike and citywide equality for all black workers, he returned on March 29. During his visit on March 29, King had to sit down with the BOP president Cabbage. During their discussion, King and Cabbage had a debate over their philosophies, and King eventually began to understand the youthful radical organization. King inquired him about the BOP and the invaders. King and Cabbage came to agreement and told the promise of financial backing along with the position in the next sanitation march organized by him. As fate would have it, the American white public viewed the Black Panthers as a threat, labeled them as a domestic terrorist organization. The United States government will respond swiftly to counteract the positive contribution and strides made by the Black nationalist group. The FBI would develop the COINTEL program, which was created to neutralize Black and Latino social leaders to prevent them from changing the fascist government. This program allowed the FBI to use any means to stop the spread of Black nationalist groups and any termination methods. Methods included assassination, propaganda, constant harassment from local law enforcement, and a huge budget. The program was successful in the destruction of the Black nationalist program, the Black Panthers. The FBI was able to lock away key members of the party without sufficient evidence and give them maximum amount of time. The local law enforcement also had access to resources they couldn't be afforded in previous times to aid in the destruction of Black nationalist groups. These resources included new weapons, tactics, training, patrol cars, and etc. The FBI was successful in penetrating the Black Panthers. The most noted success was the informant who gave the information needed to assassinate Black Panther Party leader Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton was murdered by Chicago police in the late hours on December 6, 1969. Occurrences such as these drove the Black race to defend themselves from death squads and law enforcement. The invaders also took serious measures to protect themselves from the threat of law enforcement also. The invaders and the BOP wouldn't get to participate in the next sanitation march organized by King due to his assassination on April 4, 1968. The BOP will go on to become disorganized and dissolve due to lack of financial funding. Meanwhile, the Memphis police and FBI was infiltrating and keeping tabs on the two organizations since the infancy of the BOP and invaders. The FBI viewed them as a radical Black organization, keeping tabs on the movements of the members and their possible link to the Panthers. The Memphis Police Department organized a unit just to gather information on the two radical organizations named the Domestic Intelligence Unit, or Red Squad. The police even sought informants to infiltrate the organization, such as college students, and even embedded their own agent into the organization. This was due to a lack of security screenings of the organization and a quick spread of them allowed them to move easily within the BOP and invaders organization. In 1969, the invaders were the only active remaining radical grassroots organization in the city of Memphis. The Memphis police went to work dismantling the group by targeting and locking up key membership in the invaders organization on false charges and other conspiracy charges. The invaded facilities that were once activity centers for black youth were closed down and sold due to the invaders' failure to pay rent. The local NAACP and COME and AIM organizations stopped funding the group activity centers and activities. Basically, they cut off all financial resources for the invaders and allowed them to starve themselves to death, eventually dissolving them and dismantling them. The group began to disband without the proper leadership and funding. It split and developed other radical parties such as the People and the People's Revolutionary Party, the PRP, led by one former Invaders member named Lance Sweet Willie Wine Watson. Two other members of the Invaders, Maurice Smith and John C. Lewis, went to establish the Memphis Black Panther Party chapter, consuming of members of the Invaders and the PRP. While the black community in Memphis were seeking to get their liberation, to get their freedom from the oppression of the white people, of the white community, Nashville was also doing the same thing. Nashville was taking a different route, in which involved more peaceful protests and less radical organization than compared to Memphis.
This part of the documentary will be based off the civil rights movement that took place in Nashville, Tennessee. Although a lot of us are unaware of the groups and leaders as well as the movement that took place in Nashville, Tennessee, this movement played a very important part of Black American history. There's also a book based off of the events that took place in Nashville, Tennessee, named Because of You. College students played major key roles in the civil rights movement, as well as the biggest victories in the civil rights movement. The Nashville students dramatically expanded the notion on what a movement was on 2 or 3 occasions, said the historian Taylor Branch, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of America in the King Years. The students were and are complicated human beings. Many would go to achieve spectacular successes, while others met spectacular failure. But most would come to view the protest as a very important movement, as well as undertaking of their lives. The students came together under Reverend James Larson, a graduate divinity student who moved to Nashville after King literally begged him to move South Branch. In the fall of 1959, Larson started holding workshops on nonviolent action. Students from Fisk and Tennessee State University's Mary Medical College and American Baptist Theological Seminary gathered at Clark Memorial United Methodist Church on 14th Avenue North. Clark was the birthplace of the civil rights movement in Nashville, said Matthew Walker Jr., who participated in Larson's workshop and the sit-ins as a Fisk student. As Larson stood or sat on the side of the fellowship hall and the students sat in rows of chairs, they talked about Jesus and Gandhi, or they would role play and sit in with other students, pretending to ignore those who stood behind them, yelling slurs and blowing smoke in their faces. The goal was clear, and it was to desegregate the lunch counters in downtown department stores and 5 and dimes, where black customers could shop, but they couldn't buy hamburgers. Larson taught the students to react to violence by turning the other cheek and taking the blows. In the workshop captured on film, he urged them to imagine responding to their attackers in a creatively loving fashion. It wasn't always easy, believe me, said Matthew Walker, who lost his lower front teeth in the beating at the Greyhound bus station lunch counter, but came back to join the Freedom Riders. And yet the students were malicious about their own conduct. 2 student leaders of American Baptists, Lewis and Bernard Lafayette, passed out a list of rules. 1, don't laugh out loud. 2, don't block entrances to the store. 3, be friendly and courteous. 4, always face the counter. They had also dressed like they were going to church, but had often went to jail. On February 13th, 1960, 12 days after the Greensboro sit-ins occurred, local college students entered S.H. Crest, Woolsworth, and McKellen stores at 12:40 p.m. in downtown Nashville. After making their purchases at stores, the students sat in at lunch counters. Store owners initially refused to serve the students and closed the counters, claiming that it was their moral right to determine whom they would or would not serve. The students continued the sit-ins over the next 3 months, expanding their targets to include lunch counters at the Greyhound and Trailways, bus terminals, Grant's Variety Stores, Walgreens, and major Nashville department stores, Chan, Sloan, and Harvey. As racial tension grew in Nashville, Mayor Ben West appointed a biracial committee to investigate segregation in the city. Despite the committee's numerous attempts to compromise, the students declared that they would accept nothing less than acknowledgement of their rights to sit in the store lunch counters along with the white customers. The Reverend Kelly Miller Smith walked at the front of the Nashville civil rights movement for years, both leading the way and emboldening a younger generation of leaders. The tall, eloquent pastor was a natural leader, a man other people were drawn to. He also helped a group of college students see that they could change their city and nation. Smith was born in 1920 and grew up in an all-black Mound Bayou, Miss. He moved from Vicksburg, Miss, to Nashville in 1951, a few years after he met his wife, Alice. The couple had 4 children. The oldest, Joy, held her father's hand as she became one of the 11 black students to interrogate Nashville's public schools in 1957. In 1960, students from America Baptist and the cities of other black colleges started protesting segregation at the lunch counters of downtown department stores and five and dimes. Smith offered his church, First Baptist Capitol Hill, as a staging ground. Lafayette and Smith preached the social gospel, the idea that the Bible's teachings are irrelevant to issues of the day. Smith left to lead a much larger church in Cleveland in 1963. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., a close friend, spoke at his installation service, but Smith left after about 6 weeks to return to First Baptist Church, Capitol Hill. He thought that he had not finished the work in Nashville. There was a statement that came from his wife, Alice Smith. On April 5th, the committee suggested that counters be divided into blacks and whites section. The Nashville Christian Leadership Conference, which worked with the Nashville student movement, rejected the proposal, arguing that segregation of the counters was no better than black exclusion from them. On April 19th, a bomb destroyed the home of Z. Alexander Lobby, who was the defense attorney representing many of the protesters. The bombing of Lobby's home triggered a mass march in the city hall, where 2,500 protesters demanded answers from Mayor West. Diane Nash pointedly asked Mayor West if it was wrong for a citizen of Nashville to discriminate against his fellow citizen because of his race or skin color. The mayor admitted that it was wrong, giving students an important symbolic victory in their campaign. Nash then asked the mayor if the lunch counters in Nashville should be desegregated. The mayor said, yeah, they should. After weeks of secret negotiating between merchants and protest leaders, an agreement was finally reached on the first week of May. On May 10th, 6 downtown stores opened their lunch counters to black customers for the first time. The customers arrived in groups of 2 or 3 during the afternoon and were served without incident. With that agreement, Nashville became the first major southern city to begin desegregating public faculties. The Nashville campaign became a model for other civil rights protests in 1960s and in the 1970s.
There are so many unknown heroes and groups in the civil rights and black nationalist movement during the 60s and 70s. From the brave students who defied the odds and fought against the white oppression in Nashville,
to the invaders and BOP in Memphis who took deviant black youth and turned them into hardcore conscious liberators who vowed to change the city. These young black males and females are true patriots, and their sacrifices deserve to be known and respected.